again, everyone, and welcome back to Reddit Aliens. I am John, and as always, thank you so much for being here. Good topic for you today, a little not safe for work. Let's do it. What's the most shocking thing you have ever seen? Please remember to like, share, and subscribe. I saw an entire intact brain steaming on the road one morning before dawn. Then another 30 feet down the road was the rest of the deer all crumpled up and missing the back of its skull. It was a pretty creepy few seconds before I saw the body. A kid bawling his eyes out, begging with a sign and no coat in 20-degree weather and downtown setting. It was really windy out, and I saw him talking briefly to his mom in a doorway who was bundled up out of the cold, texting the whole time. She was dressed expensively, looked comfortable, and didn't seem to want to be seen with him. Talked to building security, who brought the boy inside. Was on my way to work, so I didn't get to see the full resolution. Shitty mom. I was a teenager, and we found my mom unresponsive, slumped over forwards on the couch. My boyfriend lifted her up, and to look at her, and to check for a pulse. Her hand stayed stuck to her face, and she was in full rigor mortis. He then dropped her lividity had set in, and her whole face was almost black. Rest in peace, Mom. Murder-suicide scene where the couple was having sex. Man shot his woman in the head as they were doing doggy. Then he turned the gun on himself. She was still ass up in the air. He was slumped at the end of the bed. Dogs attacked him for hurting the woman. They tore him to shreds. I used to work as a pipe fitter, and one day one of the electricians on the job didn't observe proper tag-out procedure, and his partner electrified the line he was working on, fried him on the spot. Awful to watch, and literally shocking. When I was 4, my grandma hit a drunk guy who stumbled into the road as we were driving my grandpa some dinner at work. I was in the front seat of the van. The guy came halfway through the windshield and landed on me. I'm 34 now, and remember it like it was yesterday. And the police, came some good people who had stopped to see if they could help, gave me a ride home while my grandma dealt with the police. I remember giving them my address, and the husband using a key map to get me to my mom. Yeah, I could see how something like that could stick with you since you're 4 years old. That's pretty wild. Hope you're doing all right. As a hardware tech working at a hospital, I got a high-priority ticket to go into the OR. A computer shut down in the middle of performing open-heart surgery on this guy. I normally don't cover this area, but it was early in the morning, and I was the only tech on site. I go down there, and I have to gown up to go into the room. I had no issue going in till the nurse was like, "Oh my God, have you ever been in a surgery room before?" The room is a bloodbath. This guy is cut wide open. Are you going to be okay? I was like, I was going to be fine before you started talking to me. Anyway, I go into the room, and it is a bloodbath, with the guy's chest cut wide open and a group of people operating on him with country music going while they were all singing. The issue was easy to fix. It was a desktop on a mobile cart that had limited mobility in that section of that room. Anyway, they had it pulled out as far as it could go, and the power cable came out of the desktop slightly. I just had to tighten up the connection and turn it on. It was one of the most shocking and amazing things I've seen. Just the guy's chest wide open and how calm and casually they were singing. Battle of al-Nasiriyah, Iraq, 2003. I was on a convoy manning a 50 cal when our convoy got attacked. Humvee in front of me took an RPG as well as heavy RPK fire. I traversed the 50 over and went cyclic. After what seemed like an eternity, most of them were either dead, wounded, or shitting their pants. I watched a Navy medic pull a Marine out of the vehicle in front of me, and his arm fell off. Part of his face was missing as well. I puked and shook like a leaf. There are a lot of things I've seen. Working at a hospital, there are tons of things that I could say about things I saw in the ER which were horrible. But I think what affected me the most was watching nurses get off their shift in the height of the pandemic in 2020, sit in their car and just break down crying. Men and women. We lost a lot of patients, and it's not because we're negligent or subpar. I saw a friend, a charge nurse for an ICU, sitting down at a table when getting food to eat. He just had that battle fatigue stare. Couldn't really say shit, just had to glass eye his way through the meal. I watched a bike crash live. A guy rode his bike without his helmet on, and a huge trailer crashed onto him head on. He flew almost 6 or 7 feet and landed on his head, and his skull rolled down the road and his brain was laying on the road. The memory is still etched into my brain. This happened a long time ago when I was 10. It still gives me goosebumps whenever I think about it. A homeless man froze to death on the sidewalk. He had a bottle of beer in his hand, hardly any clothes, and barefoot. I was just a kid, maybe 9. It definitely stuck with me, maybe more so because my father was also a homeless alcoholic at the time, but he usually found a woman to stay with, especially during winter. Sometimes when it's really cold, I can see the whole thing in front of me. People standing there calling the police or ambulance, etc., not knowing what to do. Me and my mom on our way to go shopping. It was so cold, so much snow, and this guy just laying there completely still. Maybe he fell and hit his head. Maybe he had an alcohol overdose. Maybe he got beat up. I don't know how it ended up there on the sidewalk, but I'll never forget it. Forgive my mild cynicism, or perhaps even borderline political type rant, but it would appear at times our government is good at spending money on helping people who sometimes have a lot of money, and spend a lot less money helping people that might actually need it. What do you think? I have no actual memory of it, but when I was around 5, my father died in a fire. Apparently I was there for it. Then there was another time where my cousin was run over by my mother. I was also around the same age as before, and was there at the time to see. Can't remember either event, but I bet they both contribute to my panic attacks from fear of death. To clarify, both were horrible accidents. My father's was the day after his wedding to my stepmother. They drank a bit too much and left candles burning. My cousin Carly was in the driveway while my mother backed her large truck out. I saw both, but my brain removed them both to save me. A while ago, I saw a video of a guy being shot in the side of the head with a gun by a friend of his. It was by pure accident. Somehow he survived, but was disabled from the waist down. The video is disturbing to see, and the worst part was to see that both his friends that were in the car just up and ran off. I hope he stopped talking to their sorry asses. If you mean worst thing I've seen in real life, it'd have to have been a car accident I was in back in 2010. One of my mother's exes fell asleep behind the wheel and it rolled 3 times before stopping. I don't remember a whole lot, but my mother lost a large chunk of her foot. My ear was torn open, and her ex had a broken neck. Somehow, everyone survived. Moving to California to go to college, so I drove from my home state. An hour or so from passing the Arizona border, I came upon traffic kind of slowing down, and when I noticed that there had been a recent accident up ahead, I was paying attention to it. At first I see a couple of tiny little grass fires up ahead, before the car accident. When I got to the scene, I saw 2 people completely burning in their car. It was really effed up. Fast forward a year, and me and a best friend of mine were headed back to 29 Palms so I could drop him off and leave. It was springtime, and the snow was melting from the top of the mountains, and it was also raining in some areas. All of a sudden, about a quarter mile in front of us, a huge, ginormous wave of water completely takes out the road in front of us like it was nothing. We were in the middle of the desert, and completely came out of nowhere. Ever since, I've always heeded what the road signs say when I drive. Seen a few crazy things. Which one is the craziest, I'll let you decide. Once saw a window washing platform that was 40 stories up become detached on one end and was swaying wildly in the wind while the guy on it held on for dear life. He was safety rescued, thankfully. Saw my brother fall off of a cliff that was 80 to 100 feet high. He survived and somehow didn't break his legs, spine, or split his skull open. He did have several broken ribs, a collapsed lung, and a ruptured spleen, but he made a full recovery. Saw a woman get run over by a semi-truck while in a crosswalk. She was maybe just a few steps behind me when it happened, and I just had happened to be on the sidewalk myself. I'll never forget seeing tire tread marks on her flattened midsection. She was still alive and calling ever so weakly for help, until she just faded. She didn't survive, unfortunately. One time, I nearly got struck by lightning while tripping balls on LSD. I was camping with my ex when a storm showed up, so we took shelter in the car. At one point, I looked at her and her hair was standing right up on end, and so was mine. And then, kaboom! It landed right beside me. If I had the window down, I could have reached out and grabbed it. It was like someone tossed a flashbang right beside me, super loud and bright. It was scary as hell, but also makes for a good story. I'm very lucky in that I've not personally witnessed anything too traumatic. However, I remember being shocked by the news article I read a number of years ago. Basically, some kids drowned in the sea somewhere off the coast of Italy, and people continued to sit on the beach and sunbathe whilst the bodies were retrieved and lying on the beach. Apparently, people didn't care because the kids were travelers or something. I really don't understand how people can be so cold and heartless, and it really upset me to read. I, now 33 female, was 21 and a sheriff's deputy. I was brand new to the department. I received a call about a serious accident on the interstate in which the vehicle had rolled multiple times and the driver was ejected. The part of the interstate was through a small mountain range and was lined with rock walls. I was the first one on scene. I even beat the fire department and ambulance there. When I arrived, there were witnesses who had stayed up and helped until help showed up. I knew there were likely injuries to the driver, so I asked where they were. One of the witnesses, in a solemn tone, said, "He's right here." I was not prepared for what I was about to see. When the driver ejected out of the vehicle, he flew headfirst into the rock wall and dropped onto the ground. His body was folded backwards like a rag doll. His head was literally busted open like a coconut. His eyes were already wilting, grayed over. I remember being shocked at how fast the human body starts to decay. Then I remember looking up onto the rock wall to see where his point of impact was, and was horrified to see half his brain dangling from a wedge in the wall. I don't even remember noticing the other deputies, troopers, fire trucks, or ambulance arrive. Time felt like it had stopped. I'm not a deputy anymore. I've been a 911 dispatcher for several years, but I've recently walked away from that field as well. My mental health just can't quite take much more tragedy like that. Two things. First, saw a guy with dreads get his hair cut in a pulley out of an electric motor running a pump on an industrial site. I'm an electrician, and this guy was sweeping, and he bent over to grab something off the ground, and his hair fell out of his hard hat and just ripped from his right eyelid to the left, just below eyebrow off, and just scalped him to the start of his back. So quick to I remember it happening in slow motion almost, but maybe a couple milliseconds. Just a wet snap and the sound of wet rubber slapping the ground. He suffered broken bones and I think a broken neck. I'm not too sure. I was a contractor on site, so didn't get details, but it was so gross seeing his hair and skin slap the side of the motor over and over in 1800 RPM, putting a mist of blood in the air. Second, I saw a dude go to pry a roller on a conveyor belt and got his sleeve stuck and got pulled in. Once again, really fast. It happened, but just the sound of bones breaking and snapping and watching this human figure slowly turn into the wet bag of bones just being deformed, and I remember the screaming he made. I didn't know grown men went for dead, yelling to a small child, screaming so quick. This happened 10 years apart, and I've gone to therapy for it, and gotten better with what I saw, but the only thing that today screws me up is the sound of skin ripping sounds, like dry beef jerky being ripped down the middle. No one sound ripping like a piece of paper. It has loud parts and quiet parts where it breaks stuff. Sorry if this was too vulgar or anything, just thought it would be a good share. I visited my grandma all the time while she was in an elderly home as a kid. She had Alzheimer's, and yeah, she'd forget stuff, but at least she knew who I was. One day I came in and not only did she not know who I was, she couldn't talk, walk, or anything at all. All she could do was shake and look like she just wasn't there anymore. It blew me away how fast things can turn for the worse. She passed away a few weeks after that. I miss her so much. Yeah, it's crazy how something like that can take so quickly. I'm sorry that you experienced that, and for anyone that went through that with a loved one. It's terrible. I watched a plane lose power and fall out of the sky and crash in a fiery explosion while driving on the interstate one morning. It was about 25 years ago, and a military pilot took off from the Nashville airport and tried some tricky maneuver. I watched it fly nearly straight up, then could see that the engines cut off. The plane turned and dropped nose first straight toward the ground. At the last minute, it looks like the engines came back on, and he tried to adjust out of it, but was too close to the ground. It's a bit disconcerting seeing something like this while you're driving down the interstate. The pilot and some people in a house he hit all died. Very tragic and completely unnecessary.